Hey everyone, welcome to this brand new lecture on cognitive functions. Today I'm going to take a deep dive into NI or introverted intuition. I'm attracted to introverted intuitives like INFJs and INTJs, as I've said a bajillion times in my previous videos, and that's because NI communicates these life truths so effortlessly to me, and I know that INTJs and INFJs do not get how stimulating it is for me, this entire cerebral experience for me as an NE user or an extroverted intuitive. So how does NI appear to me as an NE user or an extroverted intuitive? An insight. Just this morning I was having a casual conversation with an NI dominant, an INTJ, and we were talking about boy bands, and he said to me, I wonder at what point boy bands lose their spark. When do they realize that they're no longer writing good songs because the life that they're trying to write about is a life that they're no longer living because they're so busy being on the road, performing for their fans, or recording or being in the studio recording new material. So NI basically wants to know what's going on behind the scenes. What are some of the problems people have to grapple with when they make certain decisions? And I, in that sense, anticipates. It is future oriented. How does this help an NI dominant? NI is a curious function because it is curious. It presents these general observations to an NI user. So the NI user can know what to expect when a particular decision is made. It helps the NI user navigate the chaos that is life. NI recognizes these patterns, these general observations, and it does have predictive powers. And I'm not here to dismiss the allure of NI, because if you go by Jungian literature or MBTI literature, you'll find NI described as this very abstract process in these very esoteric terms. And there's this popular stereotype of NI dominance like INFJs and INTJs being called soothsayers. And as I've said in my previous videos, there is some truth to stereotypes, and I want to examine the truth of NI with this video. NI is an abstract process. Remember, the N stands for intuition. NI deals with information just like NE or extroverted intuition. It deals with the imagination, with ideas, with concepts, stuff that cannot be grasped by your senses, that cannot be touched, that cannot be smelled or felt in the moment. But it can be experienced as vividly as a sensory experience. Now, this is what Jung talks about in his book Psychological Types, that NI is a phenomenon. It is a type of indulgence into the imagination. It cannot be perceived by the senses in the present moment like a phenomenon which can be observed by your olfactory senses, by your visual senses, or by your auditory senses. Where does NI exist in the mind, the mind's eye? As what visions? NI sees things. Now, I'm aware this sounds very abstract, very esoteric, and it is a strange function until you chat with enough INTJs and INFJs to understand what is it that they do. And what is it that they do? They live out an entire experience without actually experiencing all of the moments that make up an experience, which means that they sort of storyboard their journey and they come up with these hypothetical situations that haven't yet transpired, and they're so convinced of the outcome of that experience that they don't think that they're actually indulging in their imagination. Now, let me explain this to you with an example. An INFJ friend of mine recently had an opportunity to move to the city for college. For context, she spent most of her childhood in a small town. Now, she took a tour of the college, and when she came back, she was convinced that if she went to college, she would be miserable. And I asked her reasons why she thought that college wasn't going to work out for her. And she told me that the college was filled with rich kids and that if she went to college, she would have to mold her identity to fit the image that was acceptable to the masses. She would feel an incredible amount of pressure building this image and maintaining it. And this would cost her a lot of money, and this would create conflicts for her with her family members, and it would even sour her relationship with her family members. And if she decided not to fit in, she would face a lot of isolation. So the peer pressure would make her succumb. And she said that once she tried to move in with this social circle, she would end up doing things that she would regret later, things that she was embarrassed about, that made her feel humiliated. And this whole experience would make her question her own identity. And in the end, she would be so lost that she wouldn't be able to pay attention to her studies, that her academic performance would drop, and she would start feeling very isolated because she wouldn't be able to communicate any of these feelings to her parents, who don't understand her, or neither her superficial friends. She would decide to pull out of college, and she would be completely lost once again. Now, this is how she storyboarded her entire experience in college, or 1 year of college, or 2 years of college, without actually spending even an entire day in college. It may seem like NI is not very mystical, right? She could have pulled all of these insights just from watching TV shows or reading books, or vicariously by talking to friends. But the point is that NI imagines, NI prognosticates, NI anticipates, and NI concludes. It takes in bite-sized information of an experience, builds up a storyboard, or runs these simulations to determine if the experience is worth it or not. Now, this can make NI dominants such as INFJs and INTJs seem very stuck in their ways of thinking to a non-NI dominant. And by this statement, I want to reiterate that INTJs and INFJs are not going to be open-minded or as open-minded as extroverted intuitive dominants like ENFPs and ENTPs. Now, if you don't know what extroverted intuition means, be sure to watch this lecture popping right above my head. The point of NE, or extroverted intuition, is to find a connection among disparate things. For example, let's list 3 objects: a hat, a sack, and a brain. And you put them all together and you get the scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz. Extroverted intuition is a very amusing function. Now, if I have to use the same example to talk about NI would look at the 3 objects, and it would focus on one object, let's say the hat, and examine it. Now, what's a hat? It is a clothing prop or a clothing accessory. Why do people wear hats? To look cool, to protect themselves from the heat, or to hide something, like a magician does with a rabbit, or simply to hide their baldness or a bad hair day. So the hat becomes this placeholder of many ideas, many concepts. This is one way NI works. Why does NI do this? Because life is vast, life is profound, life is chaotic, and NI wants to organize or understand life. It wants to organize this chaos into concepts, into ideas. So it prepares the NI user. It lets the NI user know what to expect from life. So it prepares the NI user to know what to expect from a particular situation or a person. Now, back to the hat and all that it portends. NI has determined for the NI dominant that the hat is in fact an object of concealment, just like makeup. So let's assume I meet an INTJ or an INFJ on a date, and I'm wearing this hat. An INTJ or an INFJ is going to think, what is it that I'm hiding from them? Or the counterpoint to that would be, what is it that I'm trying to show them with this hat of mine? Does the hat have the name of a brand emblazoned on it? Am I trying to show to the INTJ or an INFJ that I am rich, that I'm into brands? Or does the hat have the name of a cricket team emblazoned on it? In that case, do I want the INTJ or the INFJ to know that I'm into cricket and I support this particular team? There are several other questions that are going to weigh in on the INTJ or the INFJ's mind. They would want to know if during the course of our date I'm going to talk about cricket, that I'm going to mention the team or a particular player that I'm an ardent fan of and talk about their childhood with the INTJ or the INFJ. In that case, what type of questions would the INTJ or the INFJ need to ask me to fuel this conversation? Would one of our future dates involve watching a match live? And in that case, would the date go badly because there would be a lot of noise around us, a lot of people around us, a lot of chaos that the INTJ or the INFJ would have to deal with eventually? You see how with this example, NI shows up for INTJs and INFJs. It builds a sort of narrative, it introspects and builds up these simulations or events that haven't yet transpired. Although INTJs and INFJs are both NI dominants, the way INTJs and INFJs use NI is slightly different. INFJs are feelers. That is the third code in their 4-letter code INFJ. F stands for feeling, which means that when it comes to their decision-making process, INFJs pay more attention to sentimentality, whereas INTJs are thinkers, which is a 3rd-letter T, thinking, in the 4-letter code INTJ, which means that INTJs use NI, introverted intuition, in support or in service of their thinking function, which means that they make decisions based on practicality. INFJs tend to be people-oriented. They use NI to understand people around them, what thought patterns produce what specific behaviors. So thoughts are everything. So if you change your thought, you can change your behavior. It's kind of like CBT, and if you need free therapy, go to an INFJ. INTJs are of course going to use NI to understand you. Just as an INFJ, understand your perspective, understand what your expectations are. Let's go back to the date example. So the INTJ uses NI to determine that you love sports and you support this particular team or you're a fan of this particular player. So the INTJ is going to think to themselves, what do I need to do to make these dates more enjoyable? Let's make a calendar of all the matches that are going to be played in the next 3 months, and let's rework my schedule so I'm available for at least 50 or 70% of these matches so I can watch these games and update my current knowledge or understanding of the sport or how the teams are performing in the current season. So I can add more interesting nuances to any conversations that I have with my date. Let's read up on the biography of this cricket player that my date is into. So again, I can add more to our conversation when we go on dates. Are there any matches that are going to be played in my city that I can take my date to? In that case, let me check the ticket prices. I'm sure that when my date watches these matches, again, this is NI at work, she tends to love eating a lot of finger food. So let me research some recipes of some interesting appetizers so I can cook these for my date and add a personal touch and make sure that our date is memorable. Is there a meetup group that we can hang with to discuss the sport and even get together and play with this group that we've befriended? So as you can see, what TE does is it thinks of these actionable steps. Now, just to backtrack here, INTJs use thinking as their secondary function, right? The primary function is NI and their secondary function is thinking, particularly extroverted thinking. Now, I'm going to cover extroverted thinking in a future video. But for now, all that you need to understand about TE is that TE wants to get the job done. Think of all the steps to make something happen, to make it a reality. Now, I did mention that NI is super sexy because it has predictive powers, but that doesn't mean that NI is always right. Remember that NI actually works in conjunction with extroverted sensation or SE. This is going to be my next lecture, SE or extroverted sensation. But the TLDR version of this is that extroverted sensation pays attention to sensory information, right? Tangible information in your environment, the smells, the sounds, the sights, that type of data. So for an INTJ or an INFJ to be right about their conclusions or to get the right NI insights, they need to make sure that they're getting data from the outside world, which means that they have to put themselves out there, they have to expose themselves to this chaos, to unfamiliar situations, and pick up or gather sensory information, right? Experience life as it is, so they can know how life is going to go. So if an NI dominant is not going enough, is not exposing themselves to people or situations that they're not familiar with, then their NI insights are going to be wrong, single-mindedly flawed, and the flaw being their single-mindedness. And so immature INTJs and INFJs who are simply unwilling to put themselves out there, unwilling to experience life because they are convinced that they are going to invite chaos into their lives, are going to be wrong with their NI insights, and they're going to be stubborn about how they think a particular situation is going to pan out. Hey, I know that this lecture on NI is not completely accurate and it is not complete until we hear from an NI DOM user such as an INFJ or an INTJ. And I'm going to make sure to interview both of these types on this channel. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for those videos when they come up, so we can get to the nub of NI. I hope this video gives you a glimpse, a tiny glimpse into the mental working of an INFJ or an INTJ. Until next time, don't get complacent. Love you, love me, love Mademoiselle Venus.